Taoiseach, I want to say to you, raise a very important issue for the country, in that cystic fibrosis is a very debilitating condition. And as you know, Ireland has the largest cohort per capita population of people with cystic fibrosis. And consistent research has helped to improve the quality of lives of people with cystic fibrosis, and also to extend the lives of people with cystic fibrosis. And given that we have the largest per capita population, I think there is an onus and obligation of this country to be to the vanguard in terms of research and new technology to both extend life and improve the quality of life. And Orkambi is one such drug and one such technology. It's the first drug to impact on the underlying cause of CF for up to 60% of CF population, or 50% of CF population in Ireland. It has shown up to a 40% reduction in hospital admissions and to worsening of conditions. It has shown a sustained increase in lung function, and it also has shown a sustained increase in weight, which is an important issue for CF care. It has been approved in the United States by the Food and Drug Administration, and it can apply to about 50% of the people with CF in Ireland. There was a very wonderful article written by Orla Tinsley, CF patient, on June the 2nd in the Irish Times, which details the new life that being on Orkambi has meant for her, and indeed those who have it on compassionate grounds here, in terms of compassionate access to the drug via the pharmaceutical company. And it's worth reading to get a sense from somebody who has lived with this all her life and who has fought all her life to try and improve the quality of life for people with CF. And it has transformed and had a remarkable impact on her life, and indeed did an interview with the Sean O'Rourke show some time back as well in relation to the impact of Orkambi on her. And we have others like Gillian McNulty and others who testify to the positive impact that a drug such as Orkambi can have on CF sufferers. In fact, she made the point that one of her friends who's on compassionate access, that she uses the phrase that removal of Orkambi is a catapult towards death for her. And that's what it's like within the CF community for those who are on it at the moment. And there are others waiting about 2 years since the drug was first approved to gain access to it. Now, I know it's not just a government issue, it's also the pharmaceutical companies' issue. And I know the Pharmacoeconomic Unit rejected it as in the context of the submitted cost from the company. But it's now been going on for a considerable length of time, the negotiations between government agencies and the company itself.
Thank you, Deputy.
And I would put it to you, Taoiseach, could you indicate to me, first of all, is the government still committed to giving access to CF patients, giving access to them to the Orkambi drug? And secondly, a question I've asked you before, isn't it time for the government to set up a separate fund from the health budget that we would continually invest in to provide for new technologies and new drugs such as this, so that we are at the vanguard of new developments in medication and drug therapies?
Taoiseach.
Well, the point raised by Deputy Martin is one that is obviously is best addressed by people who have had cystic fibrosis and who have to contend with it. And there is no doubt the situation has improved for a great number of cystic fibrosis people than what applied years ago. And after many years of tribulation, there have been the formal openings of quite a number of cystic fibrosis units around the country. Right. And I know that from talking to patients who have the use of those, that the recirculation of clean air and all that means so much to their lives. The situation used to apply, as Deputy Martin pointed out, that government either accepted or didn't accept the prices being put forward by pharmaceutical companies. And now this is based on a clinical assessment of the effective outcome of treating a patient with a particular drug. As I understand it, that's based on the assessment of the improved quality of life for the patient, depending on the nature of the treatment that they get. This applies in the case of other drugs for other ailments also. I want you to understand that the government, the Department of Health and the Minister for Health and the HSE are committed to continuously improve the situation for cystic fibrosis users, and that's evident in the programme for government itself. And evidence is there before our eyes of what that means in terms of better facilities. In the context of the clinical assessment of the improved quality of life for cystic fibrosis personnel of Orkambi, obviously there's a process taking place arising from the clinical assessment of this, and that means meetings between the HSE and the pharmaceutical company and the clinicians that are involved in that. I would hope that an outcome can be arrived at, as has happened in a number of other cases, where the original price being set by pharmaceutical companies was reduced to a level whereby the clinical assessment was that it was then worthy at a cost in terms of the improved quality of life that it could give. But these are very clinical assessments, as Deputy Martin is aware, and I'll have the Minister for Health give me an update as to what the current progress insofar as those meetings on appeal are concerned, to see is this a situation where Orkambi can be made available at a price that will justify a clinical assessment of it improving the quality of life for the people that are involved. It is a very sensitive and it's a really important question.
Deputy Martin.
It's a life and death issue, really, in the end of the day, and it speaks to the fundamental imperative that we do everything we possibly can to improve the quality of life and extend the life of those with cystic fibrosis. And it's not there's no doubting the health benefits to be derived from Orkambi. The technology assessment it was rejected on the grounds of at submitted cost. In other words, it's regarded as too expensive. But the actual benefits of it are well testified at this stage, not just by those on the clinical trial, but objectively. Now, there is a cost issue, and I think our policy across this whole area is somewhat flawed. The costs do keep interrupting, if you like, our process, whether we like it or not. I know that from other drugs that have recently been approved. There was a cost element, and in fact, up to quite recently, things had to go to public expenditure for approval in terms of new drugs and new therapies. I would put it to you, Taoiseach, in the final paragraph of Orla Tinsley's article to the Irish Times, when she said that I'm so far away from the constant daily struggle I was once confined by that, though the thought is deeply harrowing. She's in a much better space in terms of having access to drug in the United States. Generations need not suffer because a drug company and the government cannot negotiate a real solution. There must be a price reduction. The results of the Orkambi trial were released 2 years ago.
Thank
2 years ago this month, and that's last June. That's 2 years that 505 Irish people suitable for Orkambi have been waiting to sail onto that new chapter of their lives. I would respectfully suggest, Taoiseach, that it's too long at this stage, and the process has dragged on far too long, and it needs resolution, needs impetus, and needs an injection of some degree of urgency to get this sorted.
Taoiseach.
Thanks, Deputy Martin. Obviously, the situation here, as I said, is not a political decision anymore. And I listened. I recall the interview given on the national news by the specialist involved. On the 1st of June, the NCP recommended that Orkambi for treating cystic fibrosis should not be reimbursed by the HSE, and at the submitted prices by the pharmaceutical company, the cost was $160,000 per patient per year, and the NCP indicated that the price would have to be below $30,000 per patient per year to justify being cost effective. Now, that's a clinical assessment, not a political assessment. And as Professor Barry stated in his recent expert opinion, and based upon the evidence submitted by the manufacturer got it wrong, he said, when it came to pricing. So you know and I know that the level of cost put forward by some pharmaceutical companies is quite astronomical in the case of some drugs. It does require a clinical assessment as to whether it's justified or not. The NCP estimates that the 5-year gross budget impact of Orkambi at more than 390 million, and it notes the significant opportunity cost of reimbursing the drug 2/3 of the cost of the children's hospital for one drug alone. Now, if the clinical professor says that the pharmaceutical company got it wrong, isn't it important that we should follow through with meetings with those representatives to see can that be reduced?
Thank you,
so it's not the end of the process, and I would hope that the HSE will continue to work on price negotiations with Orkambi here. You made one other point, Deputy Martin, about having a ring-fence structure for dealing with new drugs that come on the market as they do every year. That's something that I'd be prepared to look at in conjunction with the other parties.